Welcome to How to Stay Sane with Karen Jordan. We are honored to be joined today by Dr. Assal Habibi. She's the Associate Professor of Psychology at the Brain and Creativity Institute at the University of Southern California in Los Angeles. She also has done extensive research on the influence of arts and particularly music on health and development. And she's a classically trained pianist. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Habibi.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
You're welcome. And first of all, tell us, what impact does learning music or just listening to music have on the brain?
Let me start by talking about learning music, just kind of like separating the two a little bit. I have been looking at engagement with music, actually both from listening and producing music, but concentrating on learning how to play an instrument or learning how to sing, both in children and in older adults. So kind of focusing on the children's work, we have been following children in a study that we done starting in 2012, and we actually extended it, followed these children for about 7 years through 2018 or so, and systematically explored and investigated the impact of learning how to play a musical instrument, in this case, learning how to play violin, on their cognition, on their social emotional development, and also on their brain development. This is a very long study. We have about 20 papers published of it. So I'm just going to try to pack the findings in a few minutes.
Sure.
Just kind of like looking at it from a perspective of what comes first. We basically started seeing changes in the development of musical skills as we expected. So you can think about pitch perception and rhythm perception and being able to memorize melodies. And then from there, we saw what we call spark transfer effect. So impact on skills that are not necessarily related to what you're learning. For example, you're going to a music lesson to learn how to play an instrument, but you don't necessarily practice your short-term or long-term memory or the ability to control your impulses. But what we began to see is that changes in both kind of auditory and hearing areas of the brain. So these are kind of structures in the temporal lobe, and a structure called the superior temporal gyrus, specifically on the right side, of showing neuroplastic effect, specifically in children who have had music training. When we compare them to matched counterparts in age and socioeconomic status and cognitive development. And then from there, so one thing to remember is that although these structures is important for processing music because it's a structure that processes sound, it is also responsible for anything else that is sound-based, and that includes general perception of auditory information in the environment, speech perception, language development, positive perception, communication, so anything that relies on sound. And our one of our kind of conclusions has been that given the changes in this area, it's kind of like and basically these children arrived at a milestone of maturation in this area earlier in time. It prepares them, makes them more ready for some of these skills that comes next, like enhancing their language development and communication skills.
Oh, really?
And from that, not only we saw changes in these kind of auditory regions, but we actually saw changes in the frontal regions of the brain. So the frontal part of the brain, frontal lobe and prefrontal cortex, that is responsible mainly for cognitive and decision-making, executive planning. So this kind of series of executive functions, series of skills under this umbrella of executive function, such as short-term memory, inhibition and impulse control, and the ability to switch between tasks. So the flexibility to being able to change, understand when a rule of a game changes and kind of adapt to it. And when we looked at these specific executive network in the brain at age 11, we saw that children who had music training, they engage these areas more effectively, basically using functional MRI. We saw that they have more activation in these frontal circuitry of the brain, again, when we compare them to their control counterparts. And not only this was evident in the brain, but when we looked at the behavior that involves decision-making and inhibition and impulse control, we also observed that they're better at controlling their impulses, waiting for a better reward in the future rather than wanting to have an immediate reward right away when we compare them to children who did not have music training.
So then parents who enroll their children in music lessons at young ages are benefiting them more than they probably even realize.
Exactly. That's what I was just going to say. That is like when you sign up your child for a music class, you don't necessarily sign them up for them getting better at executive function skills or even impulse control or inhibition, but it just means that what you learn as part of a music class. And these children that we studied specifically, they were involved in these group lessons a lot. It's a program that was offered in Los Angeles as part of the education arm of the Los Angeles Philharmonic. It's called YOLA, Youth Orchestra of Los Angeles, that basically provides systematic and free of charge music training to children from under-resourced communities, children who do not have really good music programs at their public schools, neither they have kind of means to go to conservatories or private music lessons. So this is a very high-quality program that is being provided to them, but we think that as part of being in that group and learning, it really teaches a child, when to take turns, when you're playing with an orchestra or an ensemble, when you lean in, when you have to kind of back out, when you let other person shine, how you have to be very attentive to your auditory and affective environment. You have to kind of like monitor what is the emotional theme of going on when you're playing, so you're not completely off. You have to kind of follow the rhythm and synchronize. So really the cascade of all of these activities seems to be not only engaging the brain, but also teaching the brain to change in these positive directions.
My book, What She Says, Words of Wisdom for My Southern Grandmother, is available now. This week is a great time to order your copy on Amazon because it's just in time for Amazon Prime Day. My book is filled with heartfelt, insightful, and at times humorous quotes from my maternal grandmother, Emma Crawford. Her thought-provoking quips and old-school wisdom cover everything from relationships to how to handle stress. Order your copy of What She Says, Words of Wisdom for My Southern Grandmother on Amazon. Now let's get back to the show.
So really most of my work has been looking at engagement with producing music, meaning that learning how to sing or learning to play an instrument, which we think that there's what you have to do in terms of learning how to coordinate your auditory and motor system, being able to hear sound and then correct whatever your motor movement, whether you're controlling your vocal cords or finger movement on an instrument does in terms of shaping the brain. If you're looking at listening to music specifically in relation to clinical population in older adults, because I think music has a presence in everybody's life, and then we have to meet the people where they are. So we've been actually looking at individuals with early stages of dementia who have difficulty having access to their autobiographical memories. And one of the things we've been investigating is that whether if we play them music that is meaningful to them, and specifically what we call nostalgic music. And your nostalgic music is different from mine, from another person. It's something that is like a soundtrack of your life events, things that are not meaningful to you. So we invited a group of actually healthy older adults to come to our laboratory, and for each one of them, we documented what is their nostalgic songs. We selected 3, and then we also selected 3 other songs that are familiar but not necessarily individually meaningful to these individuals. We had them listen to these songs inside the MRI scanner, and what we see in relation to nostalgic songs and personalized music is really this massive activation of not only, again, hearing areas of the brain, auditory regions, but the reward centers of the brain, hippocampus, which is memory processing centers of the brain, and the network called the default mode network that is responsible for narrative and self-processing and reflection. So it really engages the brain in a very effective way, and we think that's why that when people are about to retrieve memories in relation to that song, those memories are actually very vivid, despite the fact that maybe the individual has difficulty reflecting on memories in general. So we've been kind of expanding this work. We've just actually collected data from a group of 30 older adults who have mild cognitive impairment, but we are really working on this to be able to find a therapeutic intervention for dementia based on music listening that is individualized to the person, because that is not to say that we think listening to music, especially meaningful music, is really the cure to dementia. That's not at all. But I think that these are very long and challenging time for individuals and their caregivers. And if you can bring even 10, 15 minutes of enhancing quality of life of that person who has lost connection to themselves and their memories, to be able to remember and recognize their loved ones and have a connection with them.
Yes.
And generating these moments throughout their life is that we are creating a much higher quality of life for this long journey than having the people kind of suffer from agitation and anxiety of not being able to access their memories.
That's excellent. That is some fascinating research. And that brings me to, I know you've said previously that music shouldn't be considered a luxury. I've read that you've said that. Well, why is that the case? What is it? And you've touched on it some already, but why is music so important, just generally, just not even for older populations, but for everyone of any age?
Yeah, I mean, I think that one is that I think music is something that is evolutionary, has stayed with us. Really, like, it doesn't have a very immediate apparent reason. You know, like, it's not like food that it doesn't feed us, but it just seems that it plays this really significant role of bringing us together in terms of like social connection, letting us access our memories and emotions, and kind of maybe have access to affective states that maybe is harder for some people to get into. We cry to music, we laugh to music, but also learning to play music. I have observed really firsthand when we studied these children over time of how much it made a difference in their lives, not only from a cognitive perspective, like some of the skills that I just mentioned, such as decision making and impulse control, but also in their social emotional development, giving them an access to self-regulate and emotion regulate, hearing from their parents that it helped with their aggression or hyperactivity, and just be part of the music lessons, providing all of these skills such as like empathy and compassion, things that we want every child to have as part of our education system, teaching them how to pay attention, teaching them how to take turns, teaching them how to control their impulses. And I think because of that, we need to rethink that this is not an added class that we add to programs that just have the luxury to have an extra program in their school. If we embed this within our curriculum and education within our school, we actually have so much more benefits at the end of the day. Maybe these children would show up to class more, they will find communities and friendships. And again, not to say every one of these child, actually not many children in our study, even though they have very extensive music programming, ended up becoming musicians, professional musicians. Some would, which is great. But I think having individuals who have access to that toolbox to be able to regulate their emotions, to have a community, to be able to control their impulses, is an individual we want to have in society. And I think that investment is very much worth it, both in childhood and again in adulthood. In older adults, we see that we do these choir interventions for older adults to address social isolation and loneliness. And again, firsthand, we see that just participating in 12 to 15 weeks of learning how to sing and being with a community so much bring people together to a point that they just really form a bond, and they think it brings so much joy and livelihood from them. They start singing with their family members, they go back to their church and sing. So I think in retrospect, it's such a small investment, but it can address some of these major themes that we are thinking within society, whether it's social isolation for older adults or problems of attention control in childhood.
That is very interesting. So I would think that that's one of the things that makes music so powerful, because you mentioned about the fact that it could help lift, senior citizens, older adults out of loneliness. Are there other ways that you all have found in your research that it's able to have an impact on people from that mental health perspective, from of any age?
So we've been, most of my work really has been with this developmental group, pediatric children, and then older adults. And in both of these groups, we look at mental health kind of outcomes, whether in children specifically we looked at empathy and compassion, like their social behavior, but also aggression and hyperactivity that it seems to have systematically come down and engage, like being able to engage their attention. And then in older adults, again, we look at depression and anxiety and agitation, that over time when they engage with music, all of these seem to go down. Not within my lab, but I know that there's excellent work that's also been done by other colleagues looking at music-based interventions for example, children on the spectrum of autism and ADHD. So there is, I think, room and place for music to have a role, maybe sometimes a complementary role to other forms of education and interventions to help with some of these things that are a challenge within the society.
How can music heal the mind? I mean, you referred to depression just then. What examples can you give of how it helped patients get out of depression, or people that you studied lift themselves out of that type of mental state?
Yeah, so as I was describing these series of choir studies that we have been doing, this is funded by the National Endowment for the Arts, and we bring older adults, and these are older adults who have no prior music training, so they're not active musicians, and we randomize them either to a music learning class, which is learning how to sing as part of a community choir, or they are randomized to a book club or another activity that is comparable in terms of social interaction, but it's not music. And over and over, not only I've heard these older adults individually telling us, I found my voice, I feel confident, I am socializing with people more, I get to hang out with my family. So both these kind of like individual anecdotal stories, but are data showing that as part of their interaction with the choir, for example, we see more synchronization between their heart rate among the participants in the choir group, and that also is correlated with how much empathy and compassion and sociality they feel for one another, and it kind of helps them to bond within a group. That feeling belonging is an antidote to like being lonely and depressed. Feeling something that you have a purpose. And often it's challenging. I heard from so many of these older adults when they first come, and singing is a vulnerable thing, and it's like it's not sang and you're put on stage and have to kind of use your voice.
Yes.
There's a little stress around it, but it's enough of a small stress that overcoming it seems that it's really helping these individuals to kind of learn also stress regulation, but also, again, having a sense of connectedness and not feeling that as part of this age, like the next phase is just being lonely and isolated, but finding something to feel purpose and connected to.
That is very interesting. Have you found that in your personal experience as a classically trained pianist, that has also benefited you from a mental health perspective, or is it something that you've noticed with yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I think I always say I'm a better scientist because of my music training. I have a sense of music has always been a place for me to kind of have an emotional safe space, that if I'm stressed out or if things are not going well, having the space to be able to just sit and play and kind of get back to that emotional regulated, balanced space. It has also, as a child, provided me with a community of friends. And I actually was a rather shy child when I was younger, but being part of the music lessons and program and going to the teacher's house and seeing other students connected me in a way with other children maybe that I wouldn't typically have that connection with. So I think both in terms of learning how to regulate emotion, have a space to regulate emotion, I play the piano brings to me. Also when I play with others, it's just, and one forgets when you don't do it as often, but then when you just kind of like, even part of a family gathering or a social gathering, you play with another person, that deep human bond that you connect with another person when you're playing music with them or you sing with them is such a kind of a effect on lifting any mental health issues, in my opinion.
I totally agree. That's excellent. Thank you so much, Dr. Assal Habibi, for being with us today.
Wonderful. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
It was great having Dr. Habibi on this week's show. I think it's so good to know and be reminded of how important music is, especially during this month, June, which is Black Music Month. As Dr. Habibi pointed out, music is a unifier, an antidote to loneliness, and it's vital to really our overall well-being. It's so true that music isn't a luxury, it's a necessity. Thank you for listening. Join me next time on How to Stay Sane with Karen Jordan. How to stay